Mushure mekunge Tungwarara apiwa laisenzi reRiver Rehabilitation naeMasondamudzo Mnangagwa, pane mamwe mashoko akutaurwa nevamwe vemukabhineti imomo, mapermanent secretaries vemukabhineti vakutaura mashoko against Tungwarara. Naizvozvo mhuri yeZimbabwe tiri kuti makadii matima nenyika yeZimbabwe kusangana zvekare pano pachivhitivhiti paTV yenyu patinenge tichikupai malatest updates nenyaya dzinenge dzichiitika. Vakomana vemukabhineti vari kutaura vachiti mushure mekunge Tungwarara apuhwa laisenzi rekuti aite skimu yake yamene inonzi presidential rehabilitation yekugadzira marwizi anenge avharwa nemaChinese but vamwe vari kuiti riverbed mining. Iye Tungwarara akufesa mhosva yekuti anogona kusungwa kana kudzingwa mubato reZANU-PF nekuda kwekuti comrade Muguti vane audio yavo yavakalikisa nezuro vachitaura nyaya dzaPaul Tungwarara dzeRiverbed mining. Vakataura vakati ivo pachavo ndivo vanofanira kunge vachiziviswa nyaya idzodzo, ende vakataura vakati hapana chinoitika munyika chine zvekuita nezvinhu zvakafanana nezvacho izvozvo zveRiverbed mining chisingapfuure nemumaoko avo. Saka vakataura vakanangana naTungwarara vakataura kuti ndinonzi Muguti, vakataura mashoko avo nekuda kwekuti tinenge tichikazvigananda kuti vanozotorawo macopyrights sezvo tiri tisu tinotaura against ivo zvinovarwadza each and every day. Hatizoise maaudios avo but mukateerera paHeart and Soul TV munokwanisa kunzwa audio iyoyoyo. Ndo pakataurika nyaya idzodzo. Isusu nyaya iyo takaiona hedu kuTwitter but isusu kutiise pano hatikwanisi, asi tinokwanisa kutaura zvinhu zvakaitika ipapo. Nyaya iripo ndeyekuti Tungwarara zviri kunzi ava kusungwa nekuda kwenyaya idzodzo because zviri kunzi haana kusvitsa nyaya dzake kuoffice of the president and cabinet, hadzina kusvika nekoko ende ndo kwadzinoziviswa, ende zviri kuratidzwa zvichinzi eMasondamudzo Mnangagwa haana kusvitsa nyaya ikoko, akangopa mupanha wake license kuti valute mari. Saka zviri kunzi chese chichaitwa naTungwarara izvozvi kana imari kana kuti akatoreceiva mari, zvinhu izvozvo zviri kutomuendesa mukati. Ko mari dzake dzinenge dzichimbobva nedivi ripi kunana Guhamatanga. Saka zviri kureva kuti pachasungwa vanhu Guhamatanga naTungwarara nevamwe vari kufinance ikoko kuchasungwa vanhu gore rino. So mhuri yeZimbabwe zvinhu hazvina kumira zvakanaka, zvinhu hazvina kujeka. Tungwarara akonzeresa confusion muZANU-PF zvekuti ruzhinji rwemuZANU-PF riri kutsutsumwa, riri kudemba nekuda kwaTungwarara. Asi nguva yaTungwarara yekuti achiexita muZANU-PF yava pedyo yekuexita achienda nemujeri zvekare, ndo nguva yatatarisa naye. Saka mhuri yeZimbabwe isusu pano tine nyaya dzakati wandei dzatinenge tichikupai, tine maaudios echirungu atinenge tichikuonesai zvekare because isusu hatifambe tiri tega, tinenge tine chirungu zvekare chatinokupai kuti munzwisise zvimwe zvezvinhu zvatinenge tichiita panapa. Naizvozvo mhuri yeZimbabwe tinokutendai nekuteerera kwenyu, ndo nyaya tinayo but tine audio yechirungu yatoda kuti munzwewo dzimwe nhau dzatinadzo pano.
Zimbabwe, a nation with a proud liberation history. But today its army is quietly facing one of the most complex internal divisions in its modern history. Analysts and insiders say the army is no longer a single, unified force. Instead, it is divided into four major factions, each with different loyalties, agendas, and visions for the future of the country. These factions are the Liberation War veterans, the old guard rooted in the independence struggle, the retired generals still wielding immense influence behind the scenes, the new generation officers, young, ambitious, and professional, often with foreign training, and other military groups and units openly or quietly supporting President Mnangagwa's 2030 political agenda. The first faction is the Liberation War veterans, men and women who fought in the guerrilla campaigns of the 1970s against colonial rule. These are the most respected figures in Zimbabwean society, often revered as national heroes. But reverence does not mean unity. Within this group, there are tensions. Some veterans strongly support Mnangagwa, seeing him as a continuity of the liberation legacy. Others are increasingly critical, arguing that the ideals of independence, justice, equality, and anti-corruption have been betrayed. These veterans often act as kingmakers in politics. Their influence is not limited to ceremonial roles, they control political loyalty among active soldiers and rural communities where liberation memory is strongest. Key figures to watch include General Name Placeholder, who still commands respect among older units, and veteran associations increasingly vocal about government corruption. Their strategy is cautious but potent, holding historical legitimacy that the younger officers cannot challenge directly. The second faction is the retired generals, former military leaders who officially left active service, but remain power brokers behind the scenes. Many of these men were once at the helm of key army divisions, and now wield influence through informal networks. These generals are masters of strategy and manipulation. They maintain access to intelligence, funding, and political connections, often playing both sides in internal army disputes to protect their interests. Their loyalty is complex. Some quietly support Mnangagwa. Others hedge their bets in anticipation of future leadership changes. This group often shapes decisions without appearing publicly, sitting in boardrooms, military associations, and private businesses that fund army activities. If they unite behind a single cause, their political clout could override active commanders. Though their interests are often conflicting, the third faction is the new generation. Officers who rose after the 2000s, trained in modern military techniques, sometimes overseas in countries like China, Russia, or South Africa. Unlike the veterans and retired generals, the new generation focuses on professionalism, strategy, and modernization. They are ambitious, highly skilled, and often less tied to historical loyalties. Their loyalty is transactional. They follow orders, but they also measure which alliances can boost their careers. This generation is pivotal for Zimbabwe's future. Their control over advanced military technology, logistics, and operations gives them leverage. Analysts say they are more willing to challenge political overreach, but they are not a monolithic group. Many are loyal to Mnangagwa, while others quietly sympathize with calls for reform. Conflict potential exists as these young officers may clash with the old guard over resources, command positions, and strategic vision. Who they side with in key moments could determine Zimbabwe's political trajectory. The fourth faction is more political, army elements openly or quietly supporting President Mnangagwa's 2030 agenda. These units act as a political shield, ensuring the president maintains control over key regions and potential military uprisings. Unlike other factions, this group's loyalty is primarily personalist and opportunistic, tied to career advancement, political favors, or resource access. Their role is crucial in shaping Zimbabwe's future. They can suppress dissent, influence elections, and maintain the status quo. Analysts note that this faction is highly visible in public events, but less structured behind the scenes, relying on Mnangagwa's political protection rather than institutional loyalty. To understand Zimbabwe's army today, you must look beyond individual factions. The real story is in how these factions interact, clash, and align. The Liberation War veterans respect tradition and history, but their influence is waning among younger officers. They clash occasionally with the new generation, who prioritize modern military strategy over historical loyalty. Retired generals act as mediators and manipulators, often playing the veterans and the new officers against each other. Meanwhile, pro-Mnangagwa units are outwardly loyal, but often depend on financial incentives and political protection rather than true ideological alignment. In essence, Zimbabwe's army is not a single entity. It is a delicate ecosystem of influence, loyalty, and ambition, where each faction constantly tests the boundaries of power. One of the most significant tensions is between the Liberation War veterans and the new generation. The veterans are seen as guardians of Zimbabwe's independence legacy, often demanding respect and precedence in promotions and decision-making. But younger officers, trained in modern warfare, counterinsurgency, and technology-driven operations, sometimes view veterans as outdated, slow to adapt, and politically rigid. Examples of friction include control over elite units, strategic priorities, and political influence. This tension is more than generational, it is structural. How Zimbabwe balances history with modernization will define the army's effectiveness in the 2020s. The retired generals are the most subtle, but arguably the most powerful faction. Though not in active command, these figures maintain influence over personnel assignments, military funding, and political channels, acting as intermediaries between the army and the ruling party. Some analysts describe them as ghost commanders, never on the front line, but always shaping outcomes. Their loyalty is self-preservation and legacy-driven, not ideology. If retired generals align with a faction, either veterans or new officers, they could tip the balance in internal army disputes, potentially forcing political outcomes without public visibility. The pro-Mnangagwa units function as the political engine within the military. Their influence is most visible during elections, crackdowns on dissent, and public messaging. Analysts caution that their loyalty is conditional. If Mnangagwa's influence wanes, these units could shift allegiances or fragment into smaller competing groups. This faction is less about strategy or history, it is political expediency, turned into military influence. As Zimbabwe approaches 2030, several scenarios could emerge. In the unity scenario, factions find a balance, guided by institutional reforms. Veterans mentor the new generation, retired generals act as advisors, and pro-Mnangagwa units maintain political support without undermining professionalism, stabilizing the army and the government. In the fragmentation scenario, inter-faction rivalry escalates, potentially leading to internal instability and conflicts. In the selective alignment scenario, one faction gains dominance, likely with retired generals, forming secret alliances, reshaping political power and consolidating influence around Mnangagwa, or an emerging leader. In the external influence scenario, the new generation may advocate for professionalization and depoliticization, reducing historical loyalties and shifting the army toward strategic competence over political loyalty. Each scenario depends not just on individual ambition, but on how these factions interact over the next decade. To understand the army divisions, we must look at key individuals. Among Liberation War veterans, General Veteran Leader Number 1 is a decorated guerrilla fighter and influential voice of the older generation, while Veteran Leader Number 2 is known for mentoring sympathetic new generation officers. Retired generals, such as General Retired Number 1, control logistics networks, and General Retired Number 2 influences intelligence and promotions. Among the new generation, Colonel New Number 1 specializes in technology-driven warfare, and Lieutenant Colonel New Number 2 bridges veterans and modern forces. Pro-Mnangagwa units include brigadier, political loyalist, and regional unit commanders, who maintain loyalty to the president. These figures are political actors shaping alliances, rivalries, and Zimbabwe's path to 2030. Internal flashpoints include promotions and command appointments, resource and budget control, political alignment, and regional deployments. Even minor disputes could cascade, threatening army cohesion and political stability. Hidden alliances are fluid. Retired generals often act as brokers connecting pro-Mnangagwa units with sympathetic veterans or moderates in the new generation. Veterans sometimes collaborate secretly with young officers to balance political influence, and new generation officers occasionally coordinate with pro-Mnangagwa units for operational efficiency despite political disagreements. Analysts describe Zimbabwe's army as a dynamic chessboard, where each piece moves to maintain balance between tradition, modernization, and political loyalty. By 2030, several scenarios are possible. In the consolidation and stability scenario, veterans mentor the new generation, retired generals support modernization quietly, and pro-Mnangagwa units provide political stability, resulting in a cohesive army and stable governance.